Welcome to Beyond the Numbers, the podcast that explores the human side of financial planning. I'm Eleanor Coleman, and today we're looking at how wealth and financial planning are changing in an increasingly global world. For many people, living and working abroad was once seen as a short-term opportunity, a step in a career journey before then returning home. But that's no longer the reality for many globally mobile individuals today. New research from St James's Place, Money on the Move, based on interviews with 1,500 expats across Hong Kong, Singapore and Dubai, shows that expats are staying abroad longer, earning more, and building increasingly complex financial lives across multiple countries. So what does that all mean in practice? And how should people think about managing their finances in a world without borders? Joining me is Oliver Wickham, who's the Partnership Director for Asia and the Middle East. We're going to have a chat about the research and what it means for people living abroad. Oliver, welcome.
Thanks, Eleanor. Great to be here.
Oliver, let's start with the much bigger picture. So what is the most important shift that you are seeing in how people are living and working abroad today?
Yeah, sure. Well, first of all, thank you for hosting, and it's great to be here, Eleanor, so thank you. Look, the big shift that the research told us is that expats are staying offshore longer, as you mentioned in your introduction. Now, I moved overseas 21 years ago, as I know you did as well. And at that point, if you'd have asked me how long I was going to be here, I'd have probably said 2 to 3 years.
I was going to be here for 6 months, and so far it's been 20.
Yeah, and it's the classic expat story, isn't it? Everybody that you used to meet, how long are you going to be here for? 2 to 3 years. And that was the same whether they'd just arrived or whether they'd already been here for 10 years. It was always, I'm going to do another 2 to 3 years. And that was perhaps they're enjoying the lifestyle, perhaps they recognise the financial difference that might make before they went home.
I think a lot of people feel that there's a lot more opportunity out here, and it's particularly good if you're bringing up a family to have that perspective.
Absolutely. And what's happened now, though, is that things have changed. I think through that time, the world's become a smaller place. Video calls, Zoom, Teams, etc., a day-to-day phenomenon. You can jump on a plane at any time and go home and see your family. So it's easy to travel around, and therefore I think people are more comfortable to be away for longer. So what our research showed is that actually 76% of the people that we interviewed said that they expect to stay abroad for at least another 8 years. And actually 50% of them said they probably won't return home until their retirement, with about 15% saying they probably won't ever go back.
I think being abroad does kind of help you evolve and change what your perspectives are, but it also changes what you want to do in retirement, and whether that initial, I want to go home and actually live the life my parents led, isn't necessarily what you want to do yourselves.
And the reality is, I think many people will end up going home, but not everybody will. I suspect I'm probably in the latter category. I've been here far too long and actually just really enjoy it and love the lifestyle.
Well, for people like me who met their partners out here, who have no connection to the UK, it's sort of a no-brainer to think of the UK as a potential, but not discount anywhere else as well.
Absolutely.
So one of the striking things about the findings was how financially positive, as well as positive for a family side of things, that expat experience can be. What stood out most for you?
Let me give you the big stat.
Okay.
And what the survey told us was that 96% of expats surveyed said that they're earning more money here than they would be back in their home country.
And I think for a lot of us, that's why we go offshore in the first place. We're offered the opportunity, and we're given a financial incentive to do that.
Yeah. It's enormous. So therefore, it won't surprise you that 96% also told us that they're saving more towards their future. But really importantly, of those 96%, 60% of them, or a bit more, actually said that they've also increased their disposable discretionary income. So meaning money that they're spending on travel, lifestyle, actually upgrading their life with where they are and spending more quality times with their family. So it's not just about money for the future, but it's balancing that future with what you're doing today.
I think that's right. I mean, when I first moved here, it was a very cheap lifestyle, and as I've gotten more comfortable here and gotten more expenses and had a better life here, obviously the expenses have crept up quite considerably.
Yeah, it's really easy to have that creep, and as your income goes up, it's really easy to spend a little bit more. It's
very hard to limit how much you do spend if you're having a really good time.
It is, but as long as you're getting that balance right and you're still putting more enough for your future, that's okay. You don't need to be too hard on yourself. The next thing that came out was actually because of this increased savings amount, just over 60% said that by living overseas, it will accelerate their retirement, or at least the choice of retirement.
Yeah, not all of us want to retire at 55 anymore.
Exactly. And we want people to be working because they want to work, not because they have to work.
So it gives people the opportunity to make those decisions for themselves rather than financially being forced into doing something.
Correct. Yeah.
So with that freedom and that, once you leave your home country and you have every opportunity to be a global citizen, what are the complexities that come in with that, and how are people dealing with that on a day-to-day basis?
Yeah, it's a really great question. The moment you cross a border, life becomes more complicated.
And more fun.
And more fun, but it also becomes more complicated because from a financial perspective, you're dealing with different tax environments, you're dealing with different pensions. In Australia, they've got superannuations, UK pensions, Hong Kong, you've got mandatory provident funds, etc., etc. And each local territory's got its different retirement regime. So you've got different pensions, you've got different tax, you've got different investment options available. You might be managing multiple properties in different countries, but every single expat is at least managing currency and bank account challenges in the country that they're in, but also the home country.
But also a lot of people have become an expat in Hong Kong or Singapore or Dubai who've also been an expat elsewhere. So they may have lived in Thailand, they may have lived in the States, they may have lived in lots of other jurisdictions and have little pots of money that they may even forget about elsewhere.
That's right. And you mentioned a moment ago that you met your partner overseas, which is not uncommon as well. Now, your partner may or may not be from the same place that you are. I know yours is not.
As you well know.
But what that means is that if they're not, you then end up with a partner that's perhaps from a different part of the world that you're from. So you're both dealing with assets in the country that you're in. You've got two other territories, meaning two further different currencies.
And then potentially you've got, if you are in a long-term relationship, you've got in-laws that may need care or help and in different jurisdictions, and then potentially children that want to go to university elsewhere as well.
And you might decide to retire somewhere else. So you've got all of these different levers in play, making currency a bit of a challenge. And the number was that 86% of people through the survey cited cross-border and currency challenges as one of the biggest complexities. Now, the reality is it does add a layer of complexity, but it doesn't need to be complex. It's actually about sitting down and saying, well, what is the big picture? What's my plan? Where am I ultimately going to be spending money? What currency do I need to be generating returns in? You can simplify these things, but often it's just about taking some advice.
I also think people get very worried about currency. People are always wanting to make sure they get the best rates and are worried that other people are somehow doing it better than them and not paying commissions. And I think they're losing sight of the bigger picture, which is, what do you want to do when you grow up and where do you want to be?
I think one of the biggest challenges is everybody's an expert.
Yes.
And with so much social media now, there's so much market noise. You should do this, you should do that. And if somebody's already talking about the next big thing or something you should do, you've probably already missed the opportunity.
Absolutely. And that sort of brings me over to the bit I love the most, which is the financial literacy side of things. So when it comes to all these different jurisdictions and the complexities around that, how does financial understanding really shape and explain how people are going to be able to navigate this and navigate this successfully?
Financial literacy came through really strongly as a very, very clear differentiator. And those that see themselves as more financially literate tend to seek advice.
Yeah.
And then because they're seeking advice, they naturally end up with better diversification and they manage risk better and they manage their overall situation better. So actually having that financial literacy makes a really big difference. But it doesn't need to, because everybody can seek advice. And that's the overarching message coming through, is that, if you're not sure about something, don't put your head in the sand. Speak to somebody, because there's people here that can help you.
I think a lot of people who are scared about finances or scared about not understanding the terms can feel a little bit overwhelmed. And that's really where a financial advisor can come into their own and sort of explain the technical jargon and explain how that's going to affect their life and make it a lot more personal. What role do you think professional financial advice, so things like what I do, how does it play a role in all of this?
I think it's absolutely critical, because what it does is it just brings everything together.
Yeah.
But it's really important that it's a bespoke plan, because your goals are different to mine and it's different to the next person's. It's really important that you start with the end in mind.
Yeah.
So let's work backwards. So where is it that somebody wants to be in the future? What is it that they're really trying to achieve and what's important to them?
And you don't even need to know where exactly you want to retire. So I don't know where I want to retire, but I know that I will need money to do it. And wherever I'm going to be, I'll need money to fund the travel I want to do, the places I want to go, and the food I want to eat. But I don't know where that is now. So how do I plan for that?
Sure, you might not know the exact location, but there's probably a short list. If I said to you what would be the top 3 most likely destinations at this stage, you could probably give me 3 locations.
Probably Asia somewhere.
And our guidance would be to plan for the most expensive one, because of course, if you then go for a cheaper one, that gives you choices.
It's always bonus.
And financial planning is always just about giving you choices.
Mm.
Retirement is one aspect, but there's obviously also some other significant expenses people tend to plan for, and that could be their children's education. It could be buying a new property. That might be an investment property. It might be your dream home. But it's really having a clear plan and making it bulletproof. It's not just about savings investments. We need to think about protecting against the worst. If something were to happen yesterday that stopped you earning today, how does that impact all of these plans? And having a clear plan can just give you clarity and peace of mind. Once you've got that plan and you know what you need to, what you're looking to achieve, then you need to make some savings and investment decisions. And of course, along that journey, you need to make sure that you're saving as tax efficiently as possible, using tax efficient. And again, that depends on the country that you're in.
So it's not only where you're earning, but where you want to spend it and what you want to do with it.
Absolutely. But also depending on where you're resident, there might be different vehicles available. So we're sat here in Hong Kong today. We've got the Mandatory Provident Fund, known as the MPF. You can only put a small amount into that, but you've also got the additional voluntary contributions that you can make that so many people don't. Yet that's 5,000 Hong Kong dollars a month that is effectively not taxable. So you're almost having a guaranteed 15% return on that, because if you're a top rate taxpayer, because you're not paying income tax on that. And getting a plan right is about maximising your efficiency on the journey, but then also optimising that tax when you want to withdraw and spend the money at the end, depending on where you are.
I've spoken to a lot of clients about the changes in lots of different tax regimes and where it comes to things like inheritance tax. So when looking towards the future, I think it's really important to get that additional tax advice.
Absolutely. And one really interesting stat that came through, and this is more gut feel from people as opposed to anything else, but people said that they believe by not taking advice sooner, on average, that cost them as much as $65,000.
So in the grand scheme of things, by holding back and keeping their head in the sand, they lost out on money.
Correct. And that could have been because they crossed borders and missed out on tax planning opportunities. It could have been because they sold low instead of buying low and selling high. And again, it's back to that market noise and your emotions, if you like, telling you what to do. So taking advice, having a sounding board is really important.
And taking the emotions out of the financial advice is kind of what we do. It's taking the emotions out and saying, although they are relevant, let's look at the numbers and work out how we can make that dream life so that you can live the life you want to lead.
Yep, chunk it down.
Absolutely. So when it comes to the longer planning, so looking at retirement, looking at succession planning, how's that changing and how are we helping people?
Yeah, it's interesting because retirement is changing, and it's changing in a number of ways. I think the first one is, certainly from an expat perspective, is, and you alluded to it a moment ago, is that retirement doesn't need to be in one country anymore.
It also doesn't need to be, in our grandparents' generation where you get given a gold watch after working for 40 years and then, you've got a 4 or 5 year retirement before the end. Whereas now we're retiring so much earlier, we kind of have a whole life to plan for.
Well, that was the next point. So people don't want to tie themselves to one country. So it's a more mobile world. So people want to move around. That costs money. Yeah. But also people are retiring earlier, particularly in the expat world. So we said earlier that people are earning more. They're managing to save more. They're also having a more discretionary income, which is mean their lifestyle's going up. But if you end up with people that could be retiring, if they're retiring earlier, 55, maybe even 50, but we're in an era where health's getting better and people are living longer. So we're at that stage where we're regularly talking about and planning for the 100-year life. So if you think about somebody then that retires at, say, 55, you need to plan for a retirement that's potentially 45 plus years there. Yeah. That's a long time. Now you tell me, we've had the global financial crisis, you've had Brexit, there's been so many crises if you look back in the last 45 years. If you're about to retire today, do you think the next 45 years is going to include 1 or 2 or 3 financial crises?
But also the personal side of things. So, if you'd have told me 25 years ago when I was, a young thing and had all my dreams in front of me. But if you had told me 25 years ago I'd be living in Hong Kong, I wouldn't have believed you. I probably couldn't have picked it out on a map. And so if you're saying retirement's 45 years or 40 years, we might not want to end up in the place that we start our retirement in.
Correct. So all of these things just mean that it's really important to have a plan, but that plan needs to be flexible.
Yeah.
We need to build in some flexibility because life doesn't go as we expect it to. Yeah. So that's the retirement part. The other part of your question, I think, was on succession planning.
Yeah.
So how is that changing? Well, I'm not sure whether it's changing or not, but it's just always been the case that if you've got assets in more than one country, it's just, again, a little bit more complicated when passing assets on because each country tends to have different laws in terms of how those assets get passed on. So as a minimum, people should have wills in place for every country that they're holding assets in. But they should also think about simplifying their finances when possible. Do they really need to have assets in all of those countries? Or are they just trying to be a little bit clever in chasing investment returns in emerging markets or wherever that might be? So actually, having an overarching plan that looks at the big picture and tries to keep things simple is really important. When we asked people if they felt prepared for passing assets on to the next generation, only 14% of people said that they did feel prepared, and they said there was more planning they need to do. So it shows there's a big advice gap in that legacy planning space.
One of the things I've noticed, and I think it's something that's going to become more and more obvious, is that as our generation starts inheriting things that are intensely complicated from our parents' generation, and we have to be the ones who are the executors and are doing all the probate and finding all the money wherever it is. I found more and more clients want to come to me and say, well, I want to make it simple so that my children don't have to go through all of this when it comes to my time.
Absolutely.
And I think we just want to simplify things. So retirement isn't a fixed point, but it is a process in terms of looking at it, and it is a process in terms of simplification to make sure that we're not putting all that onus onto the next generation.
And you're not simplifying it for yourself, as you said, you're simplifying it for them. And if we meet, you can sit down with typical clients in Hong Kong, Singapore, Dubai, and they've got a bank account where they are, bank accounts at home, they've got investments in the Isle of Man, they've got properties in 3 different countries. They've just built in this complexity, and they've got what I'd probably call an accidental portfolio.
Yep.
I call it accidental because it was never a cohesive portfolio that they planned.
There was no grand plan in it.
An opportunity came along that they thought was a good opportunity, so they bought that property in Thailand. Then an opportunity came along to go and invest in this other investment that somebody was talking to them about, so they did it, and so on. And you end up with this accidental portfolio of assets everywhere that isn't necessarily very cohesive. So having a simple plan, thinking about yourself today, but also your family in the future is really important.
But you also don't want to spend your retirement having to deal with, all the different financial things that you have to deal with all over the world. So a lot of people who I've spoken to recently just want to make things simple. They want to be sitting in their retirement and know that there's money in the bank somewhere and everything else is taken care of.
There is a lot to be said for keeping things simple.
So what are the mistakes that you see people making? What are the common mistakes that people have made and that you've seen that can be easily fixed?
I think we've alluded to a couple of them already, but the first one is probably just leaving things too late.
Yeah.
The old adage goes, the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago, but the next best time's now. And if you're sat with your head in the sand, not planning and not
what I
thinking
would have told to my
future,
20-year-old self about spending money.
Then get on with it. Yeah, that there is absolutely no point being, get on with planning, but on the flip side of it, get the balance right, because there's no point being the richest person in the graveyard.
No.
You've got to live for today. It's important to get the right lifestyle while balancing your future goals. But first biggest mistake, I think, is people plan too late. The second one is sort of linked to the first one, is that I meet too many people that plan for things in chronological order.
Yeah.
Which on the surface makes a lot of sense, because if my priority is to buy a new home in 2 years' time, you plough all your money towards that. But then you look at the next thing, and maybe my children are going into international school as expats, which costs a lot of money as well. They're going there in 5 years, so therefore 3 or 4 years. So therefore all my money's going to that now. But now I've got to fund that for the next 10 years. And then they're going to university. There's always something to spend money on. And then you suddenly realise, well, now I've got to look at my retirement. Well, there might only be 5 years left by that stage if you've done everything else first. So you can't deal with things in chronological order.
You've got to put yourself at the upper side of your to-do list rather than perpetually putting your retirement down to the bottom.
Yeah. And the very last mistake I'll give you, if I were to give you my top 3, the last one would be, again, I mentioned it earlier, But with the world of social media that we live in, there's so much noise.
Yeah.
There's always market noise, and there's always things happening, whether it's a conflict in the Middle East that we've got happening at the moment, whether it's the Russia-Ukraine, whether it's something else. Markets are always volatile, and people get nervous along with that, which is completely understandable. But as a result of that, what we tend to see is when markets drop, people panic and sell. And then after they've recovered and probably 50% higher than they were at the drop, people get comfortable again to put their money back in. And what you tend to find is that people are selling low and buying high when we all know it should be the other way around. And
so money should be just in the market and left to sort of experts to do that, to rather than timing the market. They just need to leave it in there in the long term.
Absolutely, and have an advisor, have a coach, whatever you want to call it, just somebody to bounce ideas on to ensure that you're not making emotional decisions and you're making logical decisions based on the long-term plan and what you're trying to achieve.
I think social media quite frequently makes us want to keep up with the Joneses and have a better life or a more expensive life now, but also makes us freak out about everyone else seems to be getting it a lot more right than we are.
Yep.
And I think that's where we do make mistakes, and that's why having a sounding board is always a good plan.
Yep.
So that's what the mistakes are, and that's the way to look at those mistakes. So what does good look like? So if someone is getting them right, if they're absolutely nailing their financial planning, what does it look like? What would someone who has their life together look like to you?
Again, in the essence of keeping it simple, if I was going to give you the simple answer.
How do I be a grown-up, Oliver?
Yeah. Clarity,
yep.
Flexibility and confidence are the key words for me. You want clarity in what it is you're trying to achieve. If you've got a plan and it's written down, we all know that somebody's far more likely to achieve it. So have clarity on what you're trying to achieve. Ensure there's an element of flexibility that's built into that, because life never goes to plan.
Absolutely.
It's important to have one, but we need to be able to adapt and evolve that when necessary. And once you've got that, that'll give you the confidence. So a good financial plan should give you the confidence to sleep at night.
Not do those panicky rechecking of all the headlines.
Exactly, knowing that your future's planned out and you're on track. But it will not only give you the confidence that your future's going to look bright, but actually also, as I said, that you can live for today and balance that with the lifestyle today. Because the other mistake is that people save everything and spend nothing, and actually just get that balance wrong.
Feast or famine is not the great achievement. It's looking at more balanced.
And if you can do all of that while maximising tax efficiency on the journey, as I said earlier, then you've got a good plan.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Ollie. So for someone who is listening or watching and who is living abroad or considering going abroad, what's the one thing that you'd like them to take away from this podcast?
Final takeaway for me would probably be seize the moment.
Absolutely.
If we finish on the stat that we started with, which is 76% of people plan on being abroad for at least the next 8 years or more. 50% won't go back before retirement. Expats are enjoying being offshore. They're enjoying the lifestyle, the money that it gives them, but also the lifestyle that affords. 96% are saving more than they do in the home country. And therefore, if you've got an opportunity, I would encourage you to seize the moment and grab it with two hands.
Take the advantages where you can get them.
Absolutely.
Oliver, thank you so much for sharing those insights. I think what this conversation makes very clear is that while working and living abroad can create significant financial opportunity, it also changes how we need to think about managing money. As lives become more international, financial planning needs to become more connected, coordinated, and focused on the long term. If you'd like to explore the full findings, you can download the Money on the Move research from St James's Place. And if you found this episode useful, please share it with others navigating life across borders and follow St James's Place for more insights and guidance.